Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Weaver. Welcome to the Audio Analyst. If you follow the channel, you will likely be familiar with my take on the superb Ideon Absolute Digital Suite of gear from Greece, which dropped here with episode 163 last February. The companion written version was published last March at Part-Time Audiophile. Regardless of which take you saw, you should also be well aware that it has rightly secured its position among the uppermost echelon of such digital music regeneration machines. However, in January of this year, Ideon announced that the remarkable Epsilon DAC had seen an upgrade and is now in production as the Epsilon Meta 2024 version. As superb as the original Absolute Epsilon DAC had been and had performed here, I was more than mildly curious about what possible degree of improvement might be realized with this newer iteration. When I expressed my interest in moving to the latest version of the exceptional Absolute Epsilon DAC, hi, little girl. Hi, babe. Both Ideon and their U.S. distributor, Audio Skies of Los Angeles, said they were game. When discussing the particulars of just where and how the upgrade to my existing Absolute Epsilon DAC would be affected, I was able to offer a somewhat singular alternative. Like many other stereo geeks my age, I've been a solder sniffer since my elementary school days. I had begun assembling kit-based audio gear back in the 1960s. Then, for several years, beginning in the late 1980s, I owned and operated a small electronics shop where my duties included working on consumer electronic products, coin-operated video games and pinballs, providing upgrades and modifications to amplifiers, preamps, turntables, and compact disc players, as well as repairing and servicing the personal and gaming computers which had begun to emerge in that era, like the Commodore C64. That extensive experience base, when combined with my educational background, which includes considerable exposure to engineering and a degree in digital electronics, was enough for them to agree to simply ship the necessary components and parts directly to me. I would perform the upgrade myself here at the Audio Analyst Central. The package containing the new parts arrived at about 2 p.m. on a Monday, and as soon as I could clear my schedule, I shut down the system, pulled the DAC from my rack, and popped the hood. Opening the box of parts revealed everything necessary for the complete upgrade. A pair of new and said to be significantly improved power transformers, a new software board, and a new analog board. Desoldering all their contacts allowed me to carefully remove both existing transformers, and after noting which of their multiple leads went to which points on the termination block, it was time to install the new ones. Using different color-coded cable ties to organize and route each of their cable harnesses back through the cable tunnel, after they were cut to length, trimmed, and tinned, I quickly had them secured back in place. Both new transformers now included an additional grounding lead, each of which was routed to and terminated at the same common grounding point used by all of the other DAC circuitry. Next up, swapping the software board was a cinch. Looking much like a standard computer RAM DIMM, the original one simply needed to be freed by releasing its two sprung retaining clips, one to each side on the board. Once released, it popped up at an angle, making it easy to slide out of its DIMM socket. Installation of the new one was a simple matter, reversing the process by sliding the new software board into the DIMM socket and then pressing it down until the two clips latched it into place. Next, it was time to swap the analog board. This board required the desoldering and resoldering of the wires that carry the left and right output signal from the analog board to each of the stereo pairs of outputs, one pair each single-ended RCA and one balanced XLR. Once I had everything swapped out, I powered it up and gave the DAC a little time for the new circuitry to settle and stabilize. All that was left to do was to balance the DC offset for both channels. After minimal adjustments to each channel's trim pot, both were dialed in to the desired value of 0 millivolts. With the offset trimmed, I reinstalled the top plate, and after a quick cleanup of my workspace, by about 4 p.m., the freshly updated DAC was back in play, ready for its first audition. In my reviews of the full suite of Ideon Absolute products, I outlined its performance by defining the 4 pillars of Ideon, the 4 main attributes that I felt most clearly distinguished this suite of products and set them apart. To recap, those 4 traits are bass, space, transparency, and dynamism. Once I had the DAC reinstalled in the system, even right away, with just half an hour of runtime, what I was treated to was, well, really surprising. The transformation was intoxicating. Both the degree and scope of the enhancements I was now hearing, just a few short hours after I had pulled the DAC for the update in the first place, were substantially more significant than I would have had any reason to expect. These transformations ranged from an enhanced, deeper sense of stillness or quiet, from which everything now originated, to the more refined resolution of information from its presentation of microdynamic expressiveness, to instrumental nuance and detail, to more impactful and pitch-defined bass. Whether rendering files from my dedicated NAS or streaming from Qobuz, what I was hearing now was astonishingly more comprehensive and convincing. That deeper newfound quietness I referred to was completely unexpected in that this system had exhibited remarkably impressive silence from the start. I really had no expectation that this attribute would show any improvement, let alone an advance of such magnitude. Yet this distinctly deeper, darker silence provided clear improvements, ones which I now noted in all 4 of those pillar categories, most dramatically to the resultant bass and dynamism, with slightly more subtle impact on the system's ability to render the space of the recording and to reveal broadband information with greater resolution and transparency. The elevation in resolving power across a number of notable characteristics included greater individual specificity of instrumental detail, enhanced definition of textural substance and vibrancy of tone, and the clearer rendering of spatial information, including instrumental body, as well as location and sizing cues. I've mentioned the more refined, clearer presentation of microdynamic events, which were now even more precisely recovered, as this increased performance allowed for the system to more readily expose the complexity of shading and nuance of details in events captured down deep, to those residing just above the noise floor. As with the review of the full suite, I'll again point to how this system regenerates the track Fade to Black from Dire Straits' 6th and final studio release, 1991's On Every Street. As clearly as this DAC had been able to depict Mark Knopfler's subtle, guttural, under-his-breath growl some 27 seconds in before the upgrade, this phonation, one that typically eludes discernment, or certainly this level of delineation and articulation, has never been more viscerally expressed or distinctly as exposed as it was post the Meta upgrade. Addressing the further advantages now exposed in the lowest registers, some of my favorite musical passages that double as torture tests for bass reproduction include the subterranean organ notes from Saint-Saëns' Third Symphony, the Mercury DSD 256 file, the voice of the genie after his release from the lamp in Three Wishes from Roger Waters' Amused to Death from the Analog Productions DSD 64 file, or the concussive impact and punch of the bass guitar when it kicks in some 17 seconds or so into Sia from the Dead Mouse release, While One is Less Than Two, a 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz FLAC rip from the AstralWorks compact disc. Revisiting these examples now, after the updates, I found them to be recreated in the fastest, most articulately defined, and impactful manner I have yet experienced from my system. The Ideon Absolute Epsilon DAC originally sold for $47,000. The new Meta version carries a retail price of $49,900. While that represents an increase in price of less than 6%, it delivers an entirely new pinnacle of performance. One that I can comfortably characterize as providing something along the lines of a 25 to 35% overall improvement over the benchmark setting performance of the original Absolute Epsilon DAC. Such a judicious price increase, given the significance of the considerably more refined and elevated performance it delivers, forces me to make the case that such an equitable increase is not only fair, but that it actually constitutes a bargain. I know, but I mean it. And for those of you who own the original Ideon Absolute Epsilon DAC, if you haven't done so already, reach out to your dealer or directly to Audio Skies to arrange for your update, which can typically be completed for $5,000, including parts, labor, and shipping. In a time when many products are supplanted by a Mark II, enhanced or improved version, often only months after the original model was released, many of which offer, at best, only minor, often barely, if at all, perceptible differences in performance, or at worst, merely updated livery or other cosmetic changes. This revision is among the most remarkably effective and worthwhile upgrades I've ever experienced firsthand. With this comprehensive revisit and update, Ideon has taken its world-class reference-level DAC to an even more accomplished and exciting level of performance. Bravo, Ideon. Thank you for taking the time to drop by today. Further information on supporting the channel may be found in today's description section or at my website, theaudioanalyst.com. Please stay safe and keep the music playing. Till next time, cheers.